Okay, so welcome to the channel, and this is a very special occasion. It's my first video doing the content that I would like to do for the foreseeable, doing band ratings, discographies, etc. And the first one of which I had to start with probably the most important band in my sort of musical sort of upbringing, if you want to call it that. We have the prog metal titans of Dream Theater. So obviously you can skip this bit if you just want to get into the ratings side of things, but I just wanted to give you a bit of background as to how I got into the band and what have you beforehand. So when I first discovered Dream Theater, it was at a time where I was listening to a different kind of sort of like metalcore sort of things. So bands like Killswitch Engage, Atreyu, As I Lay Dying, that sort of thing. I was really into that scene when I first discovered Dream Theater. So I would have been around 16, 17 years old at that time, so late 2000s. So how I first came across them was via Genius, which, if you remember the old days of iTunes, Genius was a little sort of recommending tool, if you like. So, for example, if you were listening to, say, if you were listening to Dream Theater, for example, on iTunes, you would then have a list of other bands or albums or songs that would come up in the Genius little sort of slider. So that would then suggest other bands like Dream Theater that you might like. So it would probably include things like Symphony X or bands like that or Fate's Warning. So I came across Dream Theater via Genius, and the first thing that caught my attention was the artwork. I'm a sucker for a really good bit of artwork, and it was for Octavarium, where it sits in my rating. Stay tuned for that. But what caught my, I mean, with a lot of the metalcore artwork, it's all very black and quite bleak and things for the most part, or things as that sort of style. And it was something very different to what I'd seen as far as an artwork goes as that at that time. So if you're not familiar with the Octavarium artwork, it's basically a Newton's cradle with birds purposely placed. Again, I'll go into a little bit more in the album later, but yeah, the birds were strategically placed within the Newton's cradle, and it sits on it's hovering over a field with a blue sky. So it's very similar to to an old Windows background, but with a Newton's cradle there. And I was quite taken with that. And as I was listening through the album, it completely blew my mind. I'd never heard music like that before, where it combined sort of, as you know, with Dream Theater, odd time signatures, longer songs, arrangements that are not the norm for rock or metal. So it would include sort of orchestrations, extended solos, keyboard leads, that sort of thing, which aren't the norm for what you would consider to be a typical rock band or metal band. It completely blew the door open for me, and since then I've really sort of devoted myself to the whole prog and prog metal side of things. So that is about half of my life. I'm 34 now, just to give you an idea. So of that length of time where I've been sort of very entrenched in prog and prog metal and metal as a whole. So yeah, that's kind of how I fell into the band and how I became a fan. So with all that being said, let's go into the ratings. Okay, so with all tier lists, there has to be a bottom, and as a Dream Theater fan, and I'm sure that most of you who are watching this video are, shouldn't really come as any surprise that The Astonishing is on the bottom of the pile. So this is Dream Theater's 14th album, if I'm not mistaken. It might be 13th, but anyway, that's irrelevant. But what is relevant is the fact that The Astonishing is an incredibly difficult album to listen to. It's the thing that I find more off-putting than anything else is its length. It's not one of those albums that you can just sort of put on because you want to listen to it. I mean, if you want to listen to it, you have to basically put aside 2.5 hours of music. I don't have a problem with listening to 2.5 hours of music, but in quite the contrary, if I could listen to 2.5 hours of music, I would I would absolutely love that. But the problem is, again, not just the length, it's the fact that there is so much filler on it. The story meanders, it's incredibly slow to get through. There are, in all of the 34 tracks on the album, there's probably only a handful that I'd ever really come back to. So my personal favourites from the album would be things like 3 Days, or something like When Your Time Has Come, Moment of Betrayal, Gift of Music. But the fact that those are, I mean, great. Yeah, I mean, if there's any album with like Dream Theater album with, say, 7, 8, 9, 10 tracks, you think, wow, that's great. Like most of the tracks you really like. But that's not really the case here. It's 34 tracks long. And as I said before, there is a lot of filler. There's songs which are just, I feel, are there for the sake of being there. And 5 of the tracks are just noise. It's basically just machines going at each other. I mean, I get it. It is set in this kind of dystopian land where music is outlawed, and someone's trying to bring it back. And it's those machines are what are called nomax, or noise machines. So yeah, I suppose in a way it does kind of give you an idea of what the environment is like growing up in a land without music. And Gabriel will be the one to save the day. But unlike another concept album that Dream Theater have done, which you will see in the list, this is not concise. The narrative is all over the place. But with that being said, there are some highlights on it. The main one for me is James LaBrie. I mean, everyone can talk crap about James LaBrie in his later years. I mean, every time I've seen him live, he's been brilliant. I can't fault him as a singer or an artist. He's an incredible singer. But he really, really shines on this album. He is having to voice several characters, and you know which character is which from how he portrays them. He does different things with his voice for each character, which is hugely impressive. But how the album is sort of produced, there's not really an awful lot of I mean, with the drumming, it's very there's no dynamism with it. I think it's just a trait of a lot of the Mangini era albums, was that there wasn't an awful lot of distinction with like how all the different drums are played, so it can all sound very, very robotic and a bit samey. I don't think that was even Mangini's choice. I think a lot of that was down to the sort of production side of it, which Mangini wouldn't really have had much involvement in. But I digress. But there are, as the flaws do outweigh the positives with this album. I mean, it's always worth giving a shot at if you're relatively new to Dream Theater, or if you haven't really sort of listened to this album very much. But you do have to put aside a lot of time to listen to it. But a bit of a curio in their catalogue. So yeah, at the bottom of the pile, The Astonishing by Dream Theater. Okay, so number 15 on the list is Dream Theater's self-titled album. This is album number 12 in the discography, which was released in 2013, and it happened to be released a week after I broke up with my first girlfriend. So it does have a little bit of meaning for me to get over the heartbreak that was left in our wake. But the reason why I've rated it this low is for a couple of reasons, really. The fact that the main one for me is that the songs themselves aren't. There's a couple that I come back to, namely the Enemy Inside, which was their sort of lead single to the album. It's a great track. I really, really like it. And the title track, the closing track, Illumination Theory, at 22 minutes long. Yeah, now we're cooking. That was a brilliant, brilliant epic track for one to close the album with. But aside from that, there's not really an awful lot to write home about, really. The exception being Surrender to Reason. I really actually quite like that, where it kind of chops and changes from sort of very, very Rush sounding instrumentation to acoustic guitars, back to Rush sort of style transitions. But the biggest gripe I really, really have with this album is that snare sound. Oh my god, the snare. It's not as bad as St Angus snare, don't get me wrong, it's not that bad, but it just stands out like a sore thumb, and every time you listen to this album, or any song from that album, you hear that doof, doof. It doesn't even sound like a snare. I don't know what it sounds like. It sounds like nothing else that Dream Theater have done as far as like producing a great drum sound. I mean, they've done brilliant drum sounds throughout their whole career as a band, but this, oh god, it is a major, major turn off. I remember first listening to the album when False Awakening Suite kicks in, and you hear the sort of the fills and whatever, but it's that snare. Oh, what? Surely they can't use this for the rest of the album, right? Right? They did. Sorry, there's a spoiler alert there, but they did use that snare sound for the whole album, and it makes it incredibly difficult to listen to because the main beat of the songs are using that snare sound, and it is such a gripe on the ears compared with everything else. Sounds great. The bass is more prominent than it had been, and the guitars sound really luscious and really, really thick and creamy. John Petrucci did actually use a chocolate cake analogy with the album, which was actually quite appropriate. It does sound really thick and rich, and ooh, it did sound really, really good, I must say. But yeah, the drum sound ruins it, and that is why, on those reasons, with most of the songs being pretty forgetful and a shocking drum sound, is why Self-Titled is number 15 on the list. Okay, so number 14 on the list, we have Dream Theater's debut, When Dream and Day Unite, released back in 1989. This was the only album that featured Charlie Dominici on lead vocals before he was fired, and James LaBrie joined the band, and he has been the lead singer ever since. So, When Dream and Day Unite, you'll notice it's not very well produced, but don't let that put you off listening to this album. It is essential listening if you want to understand the band a little bit more, because these guys had left Berkeley, that is John Petrucci, John Myung and Mike Portnoy. They had left Berkeley College to basically chase the dream of being a full-time band. And this was the result of all that hard graft after a few years of working at it. And bearing in mind that these guys were 22 at the time, besides from Dominici, who was a fair bit older than the guys, but their songwriting on this album is incredibly impressive, considering that they're only in their early 20s, and they were not afraid to show off what they could do with their instruments at such a young age. So it's an incredibly ambitious album. It may not sound like how they maybe expected it to sound, but nonetheless, the songs are strong enough to hold their own for the most part. I mean, you've got sort of songs like The Killing Hand and The Ones Who Helped to Set the Sun, which are both 8+ minutes long. I mean, it is one of only a couple of albums in their discography that don't have any 10+ minute tracks in them. But you could tell that that was where they were going to go eventually with the kind of songs that they were producing. The main highlight for me on this album is Afterlife. It is such an amazing song, and on the Score live DVD, when James LaBrie does it as part of their, at that time, 20-year career as a band, that live version I just love it. It is so good. That's probably how they would have wanted it to have sounded, but as a foundation, this album is essential listening, and I couldn't recommend it to highly enough to anyone who wants to sort of understand the band more and to do and make more of the deep cut side of things. There are some real hidden gems on here. The Killing Hand, and of course their classic instrumental, the Yitze Jam, which, if you didn't know, is Majesty spelled backwards, which was the original name of the band before they changed it to Dream Theater. Yeah. So yeah, there's not really much more I can say about it. It is a really good album in the context of the band of where they were going to go. The production isn't great. The drum sound, as I mentioned in other albums, is not great. But again, I don't think that was more down to the band. That was more the record label sort of trying to sort of flex their muscle. But yeah, it is full of really good songs. And if you wanted to understand the band a bit more, check it out. Okay, so number 13 on the list. I'm probably going to get quite a lot of flack for this because it is sort of regarded as one of their sort of better later albums. But I'm going to put A View from the Top of the World in that position. So I don't have a problem with how the album is sort of constructed or anything like that. The main issue I have with this album is the fact that it just seems a very formulaic album, very paint by numbers kind of design. There's not really any kind of drastic sort of left turns or anything like that, which I really like from the band. You can kind of tell that there's, for every melodic section, there's going to then be a build up, and there's then going to be, or a heavy build up, and then it's going to break into something more melodic and a solo, etc. That's the main issue I have with it. One thing I did notice as well about the album is they tended to sort of borrow a lot of the themes that they've done for other albums. So, for example, something like Answering the Call, which is basically the exact same as Outcry from A Dramatic Turn of Events. Same kind of lyrical themes, so it could easily pass as a bit of a side two, if you like, of Outcry. Invisible Monster, which actually comes after Answering the Call, has the same kind of problem. It's about someone with PTSD, I think it was, or anxiety disorder, which is basically what they did on The Enemy Inside from the self-titled album. So there's nothing wrong with doing songs which are about themes you've already repeated. I mean, I've written an album and an EP, and I've used the same kind of concepts and ideas throughout, but at least I've tried to sort of mix it up a little bit. But here they've actually directly sort of almost copied the lyrics. So on The Enemy Inside, for example, they used the line, "And my own living hell, overcoming irrational fear." But on Invisible Monster, they basically used the irrational fear line again. And I remember when I first heard it, it was just kind of like, really? It just comes across as a bit lazy, really, as far as that's concerned. I mean, the song itself is fine. It's not one I've really come back to, but I mean, it's fine. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's kind of middle for diddle, I suppose, that particular song, Invisible Monster. The other instance there's a couple more instances. On Transcending Time, which is the 5th track, they use the phrase altered state of mind. Nothing wrong with that, but when you remember, or if you listen to Surrender to Reason from the self-titled album, they use the line alter my state of mind on that song. So again, it just seems to be a case of sort of cutting and pasting lyrics and themes from other albums to then plant into what is basically a sort of paint by numbers Dream Theater album. The other instance of them sort of using this kind of method, in my opinion, was on the song Awakened the Master, which was actually the first instance of John Petrucci using an 8-string guitar. I personally feel that In the Arms of Morpheus from Parasomnia, which I'll come to later in the video, better showcases that side of the instrument. I feel that Awaken the Master didn't really show off it the best of its ability that John Petrucci can do. Don't get me wrong, the opening riff especially, is great. I love that, but it doesn't really show off the usage of the 8-string to its full potential, really, if you like. But I digress. The lyrical theme from Awaken the Master, which is an instance of copy and paste, is Turning the Stone, and again copied from Surrender to Reason from the self-titled album, whereas the river's current slowly turns the stone. The thing is, the issue I have with this is, if you're going to be writing new material, you want to at least try to keep it fresh and exciting. Unfortunately, this album is not. It's not fresh. It is exciting in places. I mean, the lead single from the album, The Alien, I absolutely love that track. 9.5 minutes. It actually won a Grammy, and I think it's the only rock song in history that ever, in 17/8, that's the main bass line of the song, is in 17, where actually won that kind of accolade. So, I mean, fair play. It's very impressive that they managed to actually win a Grammy for it. And The Alien is probably my favourite song off the album. That, along with Sleeping Giant, I think is a really good song as well. But more often than not, it feels like you've already heard all these songs before. I remember when I first heard it, I wasn't really itching to really listen to it again. I mean, it's funny actually. My wife, who isn't really much of a Dream Theater fan, actually really, really likes this album. But I don't quite know why. I mean, she's not so clued up on the prog metal side of things as I am, so we just have a slightly different perspective, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. But for me, as a fan of the band, and I have been for many years, it didn't really do anything for me, this album, which is why I've rated it this low. But with all that being said, the production is one of the best sounding Dream Theater albums that they've put to date. Everything is so crystal clear and crisp. It's really, really pleasant to listen to on a production point of view. Every element can be heard, and the choice of sounds with the guitar and the bass and on the synth and the keyboards, yeah, I can't fault it. It sounds brilliant, but the songs are not. It's probably the best way I can describe it, really, in a sentence. But yeah, number 13 on the list, A View from the Top of the World. Alrighty, so the 12th album on the list is Dream Theater's 9th, Systematic Chaos, which was released in 2007. So the first time that I actually heard a track from this album, it was on a sort of annual DVD, I don't know what you'd call it, like a showcase, really, DVD that Roadrunner did. I don't know if they stopped doing them after I bought it, but anyway, their soundtrack for 2007 had Constant Motion on it. That, along with a number of different songs from the label, Fear of a Blank Planet by Porcupine Tree was on there. There was a song by Satyricon and 3 Inches of Blood, and sort of other bands from that label at that time, which was 2007. So what I feel about this album is, I mean, I'll just get it out of the way. I'm not really a fan of fiction. I prefer sort of songs which have they're not based in like fantasy and that sort of thing. I find that quite hard to relate to. So the fact that pretty much, well, other than a couple that Mike Portnoy wrote, these are all sort of based on sort of short stories and fantasies and manga and comics, that sort of thing, which I'm not really into, to be quite honest. So maybe it's because of that I didn't really sort of feel connected to the songs as much as I have on other albums in their catalogue. But it doesn't detract from the fact that In the Presence of Enemies Parts 1 and 2, which are bookends on the album, are brilliant songs. I saw them at the Apollo in London on their Distant Memories tour, and they played that, and the crowd went absolutely wild. And part of me was hoping that they'd do part 2, because it's something they used to do when they were touring the album, but they didn't do that, which is a bit disappointing. But the parts 1 and 2 are brilliant songs. But there are a couple of real stinkers in this album. Forsaken and Prophets of War arguably are some of the worst songs that Dream Theater ever put to their name. Forsaken, I really like the piano intro, and it's in 7/4. I really like it, but it's just the story of that one. It's like a vampirist who's basically visiting someone. It just doesn't do anything for me. The solo's cool, and the main sort of instrumentation is cool, but the story, no, I just don't like it. I like the story or the lyrics in that song. Prophets of War, which was written by James LeBrie, is basically almost sounds like a Muse B-side with the sort of arpeggiated synths and the octaved guitars. And they've got the odd bit of sort of Queen sort of unison vocals, which I don't mind it, but it, to me, again, like Forsaken, it just doesn't really do anything for me. Besides from that, I mean, I think the real highlight for me is The Dark Eternal Night. And also, a bit of a dark horse really is Repentance. People put Repentance really low down on the sort of 12-step suite songs. The other songs which we'll get to later in the video, because they're on different albums, which rate higher. But Repentance is a real kind of sort of slow down, let everyone catch their breath kind of thing. And it's nearly 11 minutes long, but it's sort of split into two very distinctive sections with the sort of pattern of, repentance that Mike Portnoy has written in his struggles with alcoholism, and sort of trying to sort of make up for all of the wrongs that went on while he had the illness. And it's then preceded by a few minutes of musicians and actors and various other people who have recorded their own apologies and inserted them in the song as well. And that part can be a little bit long, if I'm being brutally honest. I know it's all incredibly relevant to the song and to the concept of the whole 12-step thing, but it does go a little bit long. But that being said, Repentance doesn't get enough love that it deserves. It's a brilliantly written song, and it's very moody, dark, and one of my all-time favourite John Petrucci solos is in that song. I mentioned The Dark Eternal Night, and it's bonkers. About an old pharaoh who comes to life and terrorizes a city. Sort of like a Nosferatu kind of thing in a way, I suppose, but it's just a lot of fun. It's really, really... the riff. You only have to listen to the opening riff, and it's filthy, and I love it. I love it. And it's just 8 minutes, or nearly 9 minutes of just punches to the face of its heaviness. And plus you've got the outro as well, which Jordan Rudess improvised a continuum solo over the rhythm track, which is a great way to end the track. But as much as I love those elements, there are too many other elements which I feel I just don't personally connect with, which is why I've put it a little bit lower down on the list than maybe what other Dream Theater fans would have done. But at the end of the day, it is just my opinion. But let me, obviously, just let me know what you guys think of this album. So yeah, on to the next one. Okay, so album number 11 on the list. I have 2019's Distance Over Time. This album is everything that The Astonishing is not. So it's a much shorter album. It's actually, I think it's the shortest album in their entire discography. There's no songs on here which actually last over 10 minutes. It's very concise. It's over before you know it, but it's got rid of all the opulence and all the sort of theatrics that The Astonishing has, and has replaced it with a much more raw and energetic and ballsy album, which again is something that The Astonishing is. Let's not kid ourselves. It's neither of those things that Distance Over Time has on it. So, mentioned the length. I don't have a problem with that at all. When they released the track lengths on social media, I think a lot of the Dream Theater fans lost their minds because there weren't really going to be any sort of like really long songs that the fans are used to. But when they were sort of recording, when Dream Theater were uploading clips of the recording sessions, people were saying, "Oh, this is great! This is everything that we wanted from The Astonishing." But yeah, I actually quite like this album. What I love about it more than anything else is its energy. I mentioned before about The Astonishing, which preceded this album as being a very long, very sort of theatric album, which it is. But Distance Over Time has just really sort of wiped the slate clean and rediscovered this sort of really heavy, hard, hits you in the face kind of album. Untethered Angel, which was the first single off the album, is a brilliant way to open the album. It hasn't. The band have basically just said to everyone, we haven't forgotten how to be heavy and sort of snappy and create good riffs. Then you go into songs like Paralyzed, which is sort of like almost like the groove. The main riff on it is almost kind of nu metal. It's 4 minutes long, so it's again really, really short for Dream Theater standards. But I wouldn't say it was anything special personally. Then you've got songs like Fall Into the Light, which comes immediately after, which is a very Metallica-inspired song, which the main sort of intro of it follows sort of various different patterns of 3/4, which Mike Mangini does a brilliant job of being able to sort of flip the pattern over with his drum beats. Then you've got my personal highlight on the album, which is Barstool Warrior. I love this song so much. It could have been on any of the last few Portnoy era related albums before he came back. Watch out for that album later. But the Barstool Warrior, I love the riff, the opening riff, and then it sort of goes into this really sort of climactic sort of solo, and it just makes the hairs on my neck stand up every time that solo comes on. I love that solo. The song itself is brilliant. 6.5 minutes, but it does take a couple of sort of evolutions throughout the track. There's a couple of sort of distinct sections, and the album is, but that song particularly is so much better for that, and it's easily my favourite song on the album. The fun side of it really kicks in. We've already had that with Paralyzed, and 137, which was the only song that Mike Mangini wrote for the band, is on this album. The song is so called because, the title was originally called Song 137, if I'm not mistaken, because that's what the tempo of the song is, 137 beats per minute. And it's also written about, I can't remember the name of the mathematician, but he was trying to find out the meaning of 137 because apparently it has some sort of significance in mathematics and the universe, which, if you didn't know, Mike Mangini is a bit hot on that sort of thing, computers and sciencey stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Then you've got songs like S2N, which stands for Signal to Noise, at Wit's End, which are perfectly placed. It doesn't distract the listener from the album. It could quite easily have been a point in the album where they could have taken a back seat, but is again all very chaotic and ballsy and all the stuff that everyone really likes off the Dream Theater's heavier side of it. The stinker on this album is Out of Reach. Sorry, James Labrie, I know you wrote the song, but I don't like it at all. It's I don't have a problem with the fact it's a ballads. Some of Dream Theater's ballads are some of their best songs. I love the Dream Theater ballads, but this song just doesn't really do anything for me at all. Um, it feels like he's kind of taken songs from one of his solo songs. I believe it's called Undertow, where he's kind of cut and pasted songs from that song and onto Out of Reach, which is kind of why it kind of grates on me a little bit, because he's cut and pasted certain elements of that song into another. Plus the guitar, what else they call it, a solo. It's sort of in a weird place in the song. It's not in the middle. It's not at the end. It's not at the start. It's kind of after the first verse, which then the solo just. I think about a third of the song is this solo, and it's only about 4 minutes long. So it just doesn't really feel very kind of. It just feels like it's just there, rather than sort of being a climax at the end. And then you've got the absolute craziness of Pale Blue Dot, with one of Mike Mangini's best opening sections, or best opening sections for a song. He didn't hold out that many in his tenure, but Pale Blue Dot, with its the 1916 pattern, is iconic, and I always air drum to it every time it comes on, unashamedly, when I'm driving, when I've got my headphones on and walking around, or got it on at home. I always do that. The other gripe I had was that there was plenty of CD space to accommodate what happened to be the bonus track, which was on the deluxe version, which was Viper King. It's almost like a Van Halen cross Deep Purple kind of sound. It's very heavy, drop A guitars with an awful lot of organ in there, which is very Deep Purple and John Lord. So they've kind of utilised that kind of fusion sound. What I really like about this album is the fun. They recorded this album together. They were sort of hanging out together and sleeping in the same house together while they were recording it. And it's that sort of sense of like innocence and the whole garage band kind of thing. You could tell that they had an awful lot of fun when they recorded this, which is probably why I've rated it a little bit higher than what maybe other reviewers of Dream Theater would do. But I can't take away from the fact that it's certainly not their best material by any means, but it is an incredibly fun and accessible album. So it's actually quite a good one to start with if you are new to Dream Theater and you want to kind of get into them with a relatively accessible album. So yeah, Distance Over Time at number 11. Okay, so album number 10 on the list, and we have, at the time of this recording, Dream Theater's current album, Parasomnia, which came out in February of 2025. This is album number 16 in their catalogue. So this marks the return of Mike Portnoy's return behind the kit after a 13-year absence of the band. 13 years, to give you a bit of context in terms of music, that was the length of time between Tool's 10,000 Days in Fear Inoculum, as well as Alice in Chains' self-titled album and Black Gives Way to Blue. Both of those bands released albums 13 years apart. We talk about how long a time that is. And it was almost like he never left the band when he came back to this. The band has come in with almost like a clean slate. They are performing to a style which the fans prefer compared with, say, the technical prowess of Mike Mangini. Of course, Mike Portnoy is an incredibly technically gifted drummer, but Mike Portnoy relies more on the feel and serving the song compared with, say, the more technical ability of what Mangini could do, and he can still do. I'm not comparing drummers, but I feel there's a distinct identity between the two drummers and what they do for Dream Theater. But I digress. So this album was released to a huge amount of fanfare, not just within the Dream Theater community, but in the whole kind of heavy music community as well. Everyone was losing their minds that Mike Portnoy had announced his return back in 2023, and that a new album was on the horizon. But they basically recorded the whole album in secret, and then it was then available to the world, I think, on the 7th of February, I actually got this album a day early in the post. So when I opened the packaging and I saw that it was poking through my letterbox, I was giggling like a little girl. I'm not going to lie. And the opening track really kind of blew me away. In the Arms of Morpheus is the opening track. It's an instrumental. It's 5.5 minutes long, but it's the use of the 8-string guitar which absolutely smacks you right in the gut, and I love it for that. It's so dissonant when you compare that with the alarm clock sound and the overall atmosphere that is generating, and you get a real idea of what you're letting yourself in for with this album. And it then seamlessly transitions to my favourite song on the album, Night Terror, which was the opening single for the album. Just shy of 10 minutes long. It's quite an opening statement as far as a single goes. They could have quite easily chosen one of the shorter songs on the album, but no, they know their fans well enough to know that if they release a 10-minute single, the fans are going to lap it up. And, well, I actually abstained. I took a complete blackout from Dream Theatre's social pages. I don't actually have social media, but on YouTube anyway, I decided to do a blackout on the band to not ruin it for me, because I wanted to go into without having heard anything of it. And I love the song so much. I really, really do. It's the one I come back to the most on the album. And parasomnia, as a concept, or the definition of it, is sleep disturbances. So in the Arms of Morpheus, if you didn't know, Morpheus is the sleep god. Night Terror is self-explanatory as to what that's about. Then you go into Broken Man, which James Labrie wrote about a serviceman who is struggling with PTSD. So every time he can't sleep, because when he closes his eyes, all he can hear is the battle cries, the helicopters, his fallen comrades who had died in battle. So it's quite a haunting song, and he really portrays that side of things very well indeed. But the thing I love about that song more than anything, actually there's a couple of things, is the fact that now Mike Portnoy's back, is that we've actually got the vocal harmonies back. After Mike Portnoy left, there was nothing. It was all done by James Labrie. And live, it was kind of pre-recorded. But now that Mike Portnoy's back, we've actually got harmonies. So Mike Portnoy and John Petrucci doing the vocal harmonies with James Labrie again. And I love, even though they're not the best of singers, I feel that the band needs that sometimes. It kind of gives it a slightly different flavour. So that's the Broken Man, and the guitar solo with the bluesy keyboard and the solo is my favourite part of the whole song, along with the harmonies. But that solo, it just a chef's kiss for me. Then you go into Dead Asleep, which is the first track, which is over 10 minutes long on the album, which is about a sleepwalker who kills his wife in the midst of an episode. Or so we're led to believe. It could have been that he was sleepwalking, or that he killed his wife when pretending to be sleepwalking. So it's left sort of slightly open-ended. It depends on how you feel about it. But the story goes in the song that he basically is innocent on the grounds of he didn't know what he was doing because he was sleepwalking. But it's that mysterious ending, the piano motif, and the door creaking, which is really, really quite haunting. I use that word a lot in this album because it is quite a haunting album to listen to. Very cinematic, which again I feel was lost when Mike Portnoy was out of the band. He gave the band this very cinematic sound by using with his vision, really. Midnight Messiah was Mike Portnoy's contribution to the album on a songwriting level. I don't hate the song. It's a fun song to listen to. It reminds me a bit of like As I Am, which is the opening section song on Train of Thought, and Untethered Angel. If you like mix the two together, you get that song. But I thought what was fun at the time has kind of grated on me a bit. It's the use of the sort of little references to previous songs, like Strange Deja Vu and This Dying Soul. There are more, but I can't. Oh, and there are more, but I can't think of them, to be honest with you. They'll probably come back to me after I finish recording this section. But I thought it was fun at the time. It got a little smile out of me. But on repeated listens, it kind of felt a bit, I don't know, just felt a bit lazy. But I know that Mike Portnoy likes to put in little Easter eggs in there, so I can't really blame him for that. Then we go into the Are We Dreaming and Bend the Clock. So Are We Dreaming is like a little interlude, just for the listener to catch their breath. Then you've got Bend the Clock, which is the ballad on the album, and it's, along with Dead Night Terror, is my favourite song on the album. Such a lovely song. I love it. The closing solo is fantastic. It's so majestic and epic. But, oh my god, why did they put the fade on it? Oh my god, we learnt this lesson from the best of times. Don't fade out a John Petrucci solo. It needs to end, not fade out. Why do they do that? But, nonetheless, that's what they chose with. But I love the, again, it's the harmonies that Mike Portnoy has contributed to the song, which I feel really lifts the song. It's a lovely track. And then we go into the closing track, the Shadow Man Incident, written all about the Slender Man, I think. It all describes the Slender Man myth. He's like standing in the corner of a room with a chain and a watch and top hat, and he's just sort of watching you like this. Yeah, it's a very very sinister track, but there's too much of the song which I feel has already been recorded by Dream Theater before, which is why it doesn't really resonate with me as much as, say, Bend the Clock or Night Terror does. The solo is fantastic, and I love that kind of very playful keyboard sound that John Rudess uses on one of the solos. Kind of this sort of very best word to describe it is like a very sort of Middle Eastern sound. That's the word I was looking for. Middle Eastern sound, which combined with the bass and Mike Portnoy's fills are brilliant. And it's a nice little bit of playfulness, which is much needed in a song which is really quite dark. So yeah, that's kind of my track by track run through of Parasomnia. Did it meet my expectations? Kind of. I was hoping for something a little bit more. It sounds terrible to say. We've got a Mike Portnoy album with Dream Theater. We should be absolutely thrilled with what they could have come up with, a 12 track of nursery rhymes or Mike Portnoy farting into the mic, and we would have all loved it. But I felt that with Parasomnia, they'd kind of, a lot of the time, they'd kind of run these kind of same ideas before. Hence why it's not quite as high as maybe what other fans would put, but that's just me. So yeah, Parasomnia 2025. Okay, so number 9, we have Falling Into Infinity, which is Dream Theater's 4th album, which was released in 1997, the first and only album with Derek Sherinian behind the keys. So this follows the departure of Kevin Moore, the founding keyboard player, and introduces Derek Sherinian, who has and had a more classic rock kind of background and fusion. So according to Mike Portnoy on the Score documentary, he played with Alice Cooper and Kiss before joining Dream Theater full time. And you get a completely different identity when you compare Kevin Moore and Derek Sherinian. You simply can't compare them. Kevin Moore had more of this kind of ambience, and he could shred on the keys, of course he could, but he relied a lot more on like ambience and the atmosphere. Whereas Derek Sherinian is like is just a juggernaut, really, a bulldozer of really aggressive sounds. And the real highlights for me on this album are one that doesn't get enough love, I don't think, is New Millennium, the opening track, and it's a rare occasion where we can see John Myung on the Chapman stick, which he needs to play more Chapman stick, in my opinion. It's such an amazing instrument. If you ever listen to the Liquid Tension Experiment albums, Tony Levin uses it pretty much exclusively on the first 2 albums before he did more bass on LT3. But anyway, it was enough for maybe for another video. So yeah, New Millennium. Then you've got amazing songs like Peruvian Skies, Lines in the Sand, and one of my all-time favourite Dream Theater songs, Trial of Tears. It's an epic unlike any other in their catalogue. It's so ambient, moody, and so restrained by virtually every member of the band, unless when the solos come in, then they can really show off their technical ability. But for the most part, it's so reined in and so welcome as far as like something to distinguish it from, say, previous epics as well as future epics, something in their catalogue which sets them apart. And I was very lucky to actually hear that song live when I saw them on the Along for the Ride tour back in 2014. I saw them at Wolverhampton. And yeah, there's not really much more I can say as far as like the good side of things go, because those songs, along with Hollow Years and Hell's Kitchen, I mean, most of the album is brilliant. It's just let down by a few of the middle sections. But let's not even get started on You Not Me. It's probably my least favourite Dream Theater song. It had outside help with the writing. It was written by Desmond Child. Written by Desmond Child. I don't know if any of the other band members had any influence on it, but certainly Desmond Child had his name on it. It's just so cheesy, and I mean the solo's cool, but as far as the actual main subject of the song, no, it doesn't do anything for me whatsoever. I've only got songs which have a bit more of a mixed reaction, things like Burning My Soul. I personally quite like it. I didn't really like it to begin with, but as I've listened to the album more and more, it's become sort of, it has sort of moved up in the, as far as my favourites go. And then you've got songs like Just Let Me Breathe and Take Away My Pain. Take Away My Pain especially, it's a very touching song. John Petrucci wrote it for his dad, who eventually ended up dying from cancer. And Just Let Me Breathe, which is about setting out, written by Mike Portnoy. It's a very angry song written about the label. And you can tell he was really, really pissed off at that. It's what you'd expect from an angry Mike Portnoy to write. Very uncompromising, and that's probably how best sums up Falling Into Infinity, really. It's a perfectly imperfect album. So many great moments, but it is let down by the record label's decision for the band to push on into sort of what's considered to be mainstream success, which I'm glad they didn't go down that path and sell out. They stuck to their guns and created incredible music for the next going on 30 years since this album. But this album is definitely worth checking out just to listen to Lines in the Sand, Trial of Tears, New Millennium, and also Hell's Kitchen. Okay, so we're now officially into halfway territory, and we have Octavarium, Dream Theater's 8th album. You would have never have guessed it was their 8th album, and it also contains 8 tracks. So this was the album that got me into Dream Theater. I mentioned before in the introduction that this was recommended to me on Genius on the old iTunes, and this completely changed the game for me. It's all thanks to this album that I continue to be a big prog rock and prog metal fan to this day. I'd never heard arrangements like this before I actually listened to this album. The real crowning glory on this album, the top of the word reference there, is the closing track, the self-titled Octavarium. I mean, what more is there to say about this track? It is one of my all-time favourite tracks. The way it moves from the opening section with the references to sort of things like Shiny New Crazy Diamond and Bijou by Queen, and then you've got the Someone Like Him section, followed by the Awakenings, Full Circle, and then you've got Intervals and Razor's Edge. Those are like the 5 sections of the whole song. 24 minutes of prog, and it's just such a joy to listen to. Funny story is that I had that song on in the car with the wife once, and she thought I was actually listening to, well, she asked, who's this? And I said, well, it's Dream Theater. And she said, I quite like this. So the album went on and on. And then it ended. I was like, oh, she said, oh, that's a good album. I like that. I was like, what? It's a song. That's a song, not the album. I was like, that's a song? Yeah, that's a song. and I'm all here for it. 24 minutes of the pinnacle of Dream Theater's career, in my opinion, with that particular song. But I'm not going to give it a completely glowing review. There are a couple of tracks which I feel, I mean, they, as a concept, it works absolutely perfectly. I love the idea of how it's paced. It's very deliberate, and it works so well with that. But the songs um, like These Walls, it's a good song. I feel that's a bit of a weak point though. That and Never Enough feel like Muse songs. Very well. These Walls almost basically is a carbon copy of Citizen Erased from Origin of Symmetry, and Never Enough reminds me a lot of Stockholm Syndrome or Hysteria. It has that kind of sound. They are fans of Muse, and the album itself is very sort of it's sort of like it's a tribute to all the sounds and styles that make the band what they are, what makes them tick, certain elements of different bands that they are inspired by. And that's basically what it is. It's an ode, it's a tribute to all these bands that have made the band what they are. And believe it or not, it's 20 years this year that it came out. And I'm so thankful that this was my introduction to the band. And if you are new to the band, I would recommend this to be your introduction to the band as well. Alrighty, so next up on the list we have Train of Thought, which was released in 2003, and it was Dream Theater's 7th album. So this is very comfortably Dream Theater's most heavy album. So they've taken away a lot of the sort of theatrics of they've done in previous albums, and they've made a very dark and heavy album here. So the production really showcased this. It's very claustrophobic. It feels like there's no escape from the darkness. The drum sound is phenomenal. It's probably my favourite drum sound that Dream Theater have done. How clean and crisp everything is. The snare sound is beautiful. Love it. But there's also the lack of sort of overdubs and things like that that the band have done. I mean, every time that there's a lead solo from Petrucci, that there isn't more guitar over the top, which kind of can make everything more muddy. And same when there's a keyboard solo, there's no kind of overlapping solo with it. There are unisons, like there is on This Dying Soul, which is a real mind bender. It goes on for well over a minute, and it's so fast, but they're so locked in. It's unbelievable chemistry that the band have, that the two have together. Not just them two, but the band as a whole. How locked in they are at all times. It's unlike anything which anything that any other band can do, really, as far as I'm concerned. So the heavy music is also combined that with heavy themes. So you've got another one of the 12-step suite, the second song in the series, called This Dying Soul, all about alcoholism. Then you've got Endless Sacrifice, which is all about the sacrifices that the band makes in order to basically make a living of making music, but that comes with the cost of being away from their families. They are all family men, and they're all very happily married, and that song is all about the sacrifices that the band make to make this living. Honor Thy Father, with its iconic opening drum solo, it is just so good. I love that intro so much, and many other fans agree. Which is written as a hate song to his stepdad. If I'm not mistaken, it was his stepdad that he wrote that about. The arguably the darkest song on the album is also the shortest, Vacant, which is just shy of 3 minutes long, written by James LeBrie, and it was written while his daughter was comatose. She had some sort of infection, I think, she was comatose in hospital, and it's a very sparse arrangement, and it's piano and cello and vocals. That's it. But you feel the anguish that James LeBrie is going through seeing his daughter this way, and it's gut-wrenching, and you just feel there's no way out. Is she going to be okay? And that song, as much as it's a breather from the really heavy instrumentation, lyrically it's the heaviest, darkest song on the album by far. And then you've got the two closing tracks, which, as an album, it's just amazing. Stream of Consciousness, 11 minutes of an instrumental, and the 14-minute plus In the Name of God, all written about cults and cult leaders, and how they take control. And Stream of Consciousness as an instrumental. I mean, it's an instrumental. It's probably my favourite instrumental written by the band. They haven't written all that many, actually, believe it or not, but they have written what I might consider to be the best instrumental in their career so far, with Stream of Consciousness. Of course, I did gloss over As I Am, which I love. I love that song so much. Going on nearly 8 minutes of fury, of written about John Petrucci apparently getting guitar tips from Queensryche. I mean, you can't compare the two. John Petrucci is superior in every metric. And there it goes to show, take me as I am. I do what I want. So yeah, we'll end it there with Trainer 4. Right, so we're getting into the nitty gritty now. The next album on my list is Dream Theater's 11th album, A Dramatic Turn of Events. I will defend this album to the hilt. It is an incredibly well constructed album. It was the first album that Mike Mangini was present on after Portnoy's departure in 2010. Everyone was absolutely, I mean, the band were obviously really blindsided by Mike Portnoy's departure. The fan base were gutted. They were, they just weren't sure where the band were going to go from here. And 2 years on, they came up with this. And I will say it is an absolute masterpiece. The production, it could be better, I must admit. The drums could be louder, and I am disappointed with the fact that Mangini wasn't actually involved in the actual writing process of the music. I feel that if he was, the album would have been taken to a whole other level. It probably would have been even rated even higher than it is now, if he was involved and the drums were better produced. It does sound a little bit programmed, but everything else, on the other hand, the lyrics, the overall idea of the songs, are absolutely superb on this album. The opening single, On the Backs of Angels, like I did with some of their other albums, they didn't they released singles, but I decided to not listen to them. I wanted to go in with a fresh perspective. And from when the album kicked in to the closing track, Beneath the Surface, I remember lying on my bed, putting it on the speakers, and just lying there, taking it all in. And yeah, by the time it was over, I was quite emotional, actually, with so many moments and songs, of course, that were so much better than I was expecting them to be. I thought it was going to be the beginning of the end for the band after Portnoy had left, but no, this gave them a different direction that they needed at the time. And you got songs like Lost Not Forgotten, and then you got one of my personal favourite songs of all time from the band, Breaking All Illusions, the penultimate track, which goes from prog to blues to prog metal and prog again. It's a meandering masterpiece, and there are just so many moments on that song that I could pick, which I could just go on for hours and just talk about how much I love that particular song. The weak points on the album are Build Me Up, Break Me Down. I just feel it's a bit of sticks out a bit like a sore thumb on the album, to be honest. It doesn't really feel like it belongs there. Yes, it's a cool riff, and it gets me headbanging a little bit, I'm not going to lie. But I just feel lyrically it's a little bit formulaic, but I mean, it's when you go into the next track, Lost Not Forgotten, which has probably the wildest unison that Dream Theater have ever done between Rudess and Petrucci, where they're sort of playing off one another, they're playing the same thing as each other, and they're doing their own thing. But it is mind-boggling to me, that section. It never fails to make my jaw drop down. But yeah, I can't speak highly enough of this album, but the reason why it's not as high as it sounds like it should be is just down to the production and just a couple of tracks which just let it down slightly. But also the fact that the other albums are just, just to put it simply, they're a bit better. So let's get on with the next one. Alright, so next up we have Black Clouds and Silver Linings. Yes, this was the album, well, the first album I pre-ordered. So when I first discovered the band, they'd already released Systematic Chaos, but as very much a fan, when this album was first available to be released, I took no time in ordering the maybe a little bit foolishly, but most expensive version of it. It came with vinyl. I don't even have a vinyl player. I never have done. But I got the CD version, which had the covers on it as well as the studio album. So this holds a very special place in my heart as a result of that. It was the first album that kind of really cemented the fact that Dream Theater are probably the most important band in my musical upbringing. The opening, A Nightmare to Remember, it's just so dark and 16 minutes of just terror, written about John Petrucci's incident in a car crash. Then you've got the other there's 4 other songs which follow the whole light and shade kind of things. You've got Wither, which is written about writer's block. So John Petrucci, funnily enough, said it was a song about nothing, which can't argue with that. The Shattered Fortress, which was the final part of the 12-step series written by Mike Portnoy. Everyone loves this song. It's not that I don't love it. I just feel, obviously, being an ending track, it has to reprise certain elements of each song, but it just feels a little bit cut and paste to me, in my opinion. It probably has to be. Don't get me wrong, because it has to kind of wrap everything up. But it does feel that there are certain parts that don't really kind of feel like they belong in those places. It just feels a little bit kind of, I'll take this riff from Root of All Evil and put it there. Or I'll put the repentance bit in here. Some of it just feels a little bit disjointed. The Best of Times, which comes afterwards, it's the penultimate track, is written as a tribute to Mike Portnoy's dad, who died in the recording process, who actually came up with the name Dream Theater, so he's an incredibly important figure in Mike Portnoy's life. And then you've got one of my all-time favourite songs at the end, The Count of Tuscany, written about John Petrucci's and his crew's experience in Tuscany, and he apparently comes across some rather eccentric characters and tells tales of the dead and all manner of weird things, whereas everyone else would say, this weird thing happened to me when I was in Italy, and then John Petrucci writes a 19.5-minute song about it. It's phenomenal. I love The Count of Tuscany, and I will always go back to it. I always come back to that song from that album. The opening section, then you've got the build-up, the heavy side, then you've got this really peaceful ambient section, and then the glorious reprise. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it already. That album is just so, so good. I did leave out one track because it does... This is the reason why it's not as high up as it maybe could have been, is A Rite of Passage. It was the lead single from the album. Quite frankly, I don't know why it's even there. It's nothing to even do with the concept of Black Cloud and Silver Linings. It's written about Freemasonry and the whole secret society things, Illuminati, and all of that, like secret handshakes sort of stuff. It just has no purpose being in this album. It could have belonged on another album, maybe Train of Thought or something like that, but it just doesn't belong on Black Clouds and Silver Linings. And what is with that keyboard solo. It's that the the bit of the 8-bitty weirdy sound. I don't know what on earth that was, but it just doesn't sound right on the album. I don't like it. It's one of my least favourite Rudess solos in their discography. We'll leave it there for Black Clouds. So on to the next one. Right, so we're in album number 4, and we have 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which was the 6th album, if you'd never have guessed, in their discography. And this was released after their Do or Die album, Scenes from a Memory, from '99, which got rave reviews from all sections of the prog and metal community. And you'll see this album a little bit later on in the video, but guess where? This album is arguably their most experimental album to date. I say arguably, I'd say without a doubt it's their most experimental album. People were wondering where on earth they go from topping or even replicating Scenes from Memory. They didn't do either. They came up with something which was a real left turn, and I love it even more for that. It opens with the beginning of the 12-step suite, The Glass Prison. Then you get to sort of uncover the whole concept of 6 Degrees. It's not a concept album, but there are sort of intertwining themes. So The Glass Prison is about alcoholism. Blind Faith is about religion, secret religion. Misunderstood is about sort of living in isolation. Great Debate about stem cell research, the pros and cons. Disappear, which is one of their most underrated tracks, which is about, if I'm not mistaken, it's just about the end of a relationship, but it's such an amazing song. People don't talk about Disappear enough, and I will be that person who will bang that drum and say how good Disappear is. And then you've got one other disc, it's a 2-disc album. You've got one song devoted to the whole disc, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, the title track. And that goes through 8 different sections, 7 of which have lyrics to them. The opening overture is instrumental, but it reprises numerous themes which will follow. So you've got About to Crash and About to Crash Reprise, which comes later, but they're about bipolar disorder, the first of which is the outside looking in on someone with bipolar disorder. Then you've got the reprise, which is the person with bipolar disorder who is going through it. War Inside My Head is about PTSD. The Tester Stumped and All is about schizophrenia. Goodnight Kiss about postpartum depression. Solitary Shell, which is about autism. And then you've got Losing Time, which is a bit of a hermit, if I'm not mistaken. It's just someone who has agoraphobia, I think. Doesn't, I'm not 100%. Someone could probably fill in the blanks on that one on the comment section as to what Losing Time is about. But it's the effortless flow of each of these 6 songs, so with films from disc 1 and disc 2. It's just unlike anything else in their discography, and that's probably why I put it up this high. It's just so distinctive. It's very experimental. They borrowed a lot of influences from a lot of different bands, and that's what I feel they haven't really done recently, is stepping out of their comfort zone. That's probably the easiest way to... They seem very comfortable in what they're doing now, and that's great, but they haven't done an album like this in a long time, and I really hope that they are inspired by this album to make something much more distinct in the future. Alright, so we're in bronze territory now, and which album will take 3rd place in the list? For me, Scenes from a Memory, which was released in 1999, and the one I just mentioned on the 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence section. So this album is a concept album. It is an actual concept album, not an album with like relating themes. So this follows a story of reincarnation, murder, betrayal, and yeah, this was the turning point in their career. If this album hadn't done very well, or if it wasn't what the band wanted it to be, we probably wouldn't have had anything from them after this album. But it's because of this album we now have the Dream Theater that we know and love today. So the album artwork reminds me a lot of 13 Ghosts. If you've ever seen the cover for that, it reminds me a bit of that. But the story itself is so original and captivating, even though they have openly admitted that it was kind of borrowed from the film Dead Again. But they have really taken it to new levels. It is so, so well written. The production, the lyrics, the whole album is a journey from someone who's basically been having visions of his past life, and realizes that he was a young girl who was killed back in 1928, and the lyrical themes follow on from his visions as his life as Victoria, who was the young girl, and the love triangle that became the focal point or the main theme of the album. You've got songs like Strange Deja Vu, where the guy is trying to sort of make sense of it all. Everything seems so familiar, but he's obviously never been to these places before, but he's going through all that. And then you've got Through Her Eyes, which is such a beautiful ballad. And when they played that in the Distant Memories tour, I was there. I cried like a baby. It never fails to really get me right here. Through Her Eyes. Then you've got Home, which is a nearly 13-minute epic, which follows the descent into madness of Julian, who's the antagonist, who he goes down a bit of a downward spiral of drugs and drink, and tries to sort of persuade Victoria to be with him. And it all culminates with Finally Free, where the twist. I'm not going to spoil it for you, because you'd have to really sort of listen to the album if you haven't already. But the whole album as a whole, it's just so well paced as well. How everything sounds, it's very cinematic. It feels like you're there, sort of going through everything with the characters. Personal highlights for me are, let's say, Through Her Eyes, Home, and Finally Free. And of course, you've got the classic instrumental of The Dance of Eternity. The challenge, which I think it was either Mike Portnoy or John Petrucci set, or they might even set it together, to cram as many time signatures in as they possibly could. And it's something like over 100, which is just bonkers. It really just goes to show, again, the whole stepping out of the comfort zone thing. They can create such incredible music by doing that. And again, I really hope that in the future that they follow those kinds of inspirations behind that. The one gripe I have with this song, with the album, is Beyond This Life. It's the newspaper clippings of the incident, which again is relevant to the story. I don't have a problem with that. It's the keyboard sounds and the solos. I'm not a fan. That jazzy trumpet thing, I don't like it at all. I find that quite hard to listen to, and as a result, I find it quite hard to listen to the song. But it does sour what I feel is actually quite a good song overall. Anyway, but yeah, Scenes from Memory, 1999, a central prog metal listening. Okay, so at number 2 we have Awake, which was released in 1994 and Dream Theater's third studio album. It is a cinematic masterpiece. It's nothing like what they'd released before, and that's part of the reason why I didn't really like it all that much to start with. I love it now, as you know, it's in number 2 of the list. It precedes Scenes from Memory, for God's sake, for me. But it took me a long time to really appreciate it. It's a very different atmosphere. It's incredibly dark and moody. There's a lot more in the way of sort of ambience and textures, that sort of thing, which was not really... I mean, there was ambience and textures on the albums before, but not as much of it. This really showcases Kevin Moore's sort of abilities, and this is what he would go on to do after he left Dream Theater. And the weird thing is, he left Dream Theater in the middle of recording this album, according to John Petrucci, which the whole incident, apparently he sort of, the relationships with him and the bandmate deteriorated, and he found it difficult to struggle with the fame that had come with the albums before. But what we got as a result of this is such an original album. It's unlike anything else in their discography. You've got Innocence Faded. I'll go there eventually. Innocence Faded, which is probably my favourite song of the album, and the score production of it is superb as well. But that song for me really is my favourite of the album. I'll just say it as it is. Then you've got the Mind But Eyes Itself series, the trilogy, which is consistent of Erotomania, Voices, and The Silent Man, which Erotomania being an instrumental, brilliantly constructed. Voices, which is a really sinister sounding song, and then you've got The Silent Man, which is a segue into a really gentle acoustic song, and John Petrucci doing backing vocals, which we'll hopefully see more of in the future now that Portnoy's back. But the main highlight for me is The Mirror. This is sort of like a precursor to what we saw with The Glass Prison, and it kind of touches on those themes of greed and sort of addiction themes, that sort of thing. And then you've got the closing 3 tracks, or those 5 tracks actually. The closing 5 tracks are arguably some of the best songs that Dream Theater have done, like consecutively as a series of songs. So you've got The Mirror, Lie, Lifting Shadows Off a Dream, Scarred, and Space Divest. Those 5 songs back to back to back to back to back are up there with some of the very best sort of series of songs. I mean, individually songs, there are better ones, of course, but as a link, as a series of songs, there's not really many better than that Dream Theater have ever done. So I'm going to wax lyrical about Awake, and I will give all the love I can to Space Divest. It doesn't get enough of it. It does seem to be one of those that some fans don't really appreciate or really like all that much compared to others, but I love it. It's so moody, and it really, and the piano is so beautifully played, and the use of the samples which kind of relate to the themes of that sort of erotomaniac kind of thing, because he falls in love with someone on a Playboy spread, I think it was, called Space Divest. That was the name of the picture, because that's what she's wearing. But it's someone who falls in love with the image. But the themes, I don't know what films they're taken from, but the samples really perfectly blend in with that. So yeah, that is Awake, and now we have numero uno to come. Now we have number 1. Numero uno, chiffre un, nummer eins. Images and words. I think honestly there couldn't really have been any other number 1. When you consider how many classic Dream Theater songs are on here: Pull Me Under, Take the Time, Metropolis, Under a Glass Moon, Learning to Live. It is the quintessential Dream Theater album. It was the first one with James LeBrie, and he is on fire with this album. He brings so much versatility with his vocals. He can be so vulnerable, like he can in Another Day. He can be vulnerable in Surrounded, Wait for Sleep. But he can also bring with it his such intense, the high, the shrieks, the banshee-like side of him, where you get from, they just come out of nowhere in songs like Take the Time and Learning to Live and Under a Glass Moon especially, which is probably the ultimate James LeBrie performances in that song, Under a Glass Moon. And you've also got arguably one of John Petrucci's best ever solos in that song as well. It is a real high point in that album. But for me, Surrounded and Learning to Live are the real highlights for me. Surrounded is the unsung hero. It doesn't get talked about anywhere near enough, but it's the section of Kevin Moore's intro and how it evolves and how it climaxes. But Learning to Live, for me, going against my head, it would be a top 5 Dream Theater song, hands down. It is a gold tier Dream Theater song. The 15/8 intro and how it evolves into all that proggy goodness that we all know and love from this band. One of my top 5 albums of all time. That'll be saved for another video. There will be something about my favourite albums of all time. I will give you a spoiler alert, this one here will be in it, but whereabouts remains to be seen. It's been an absolutely exhausting video, and I really appreciate you sitting all the way through it. But yeah, hopefully we'll be a little bit more concise next time. But thank you so much for sticking with me, and I'll see you again in the next video. Adios.